Hi, I'm Diane Milne. I work for Dundee City Council, so I'm one of the partners in the InCompass project. And this session is a bit more of a sort of a discussion panel session approach. So we've got 5 speakers, 3 of whom are project partners. So we have Michele, who is from Milan in Italy, who works at universities in Italy, Grenoble, teaching innovation, creativity, network management. We've got Matt, who is an independent consultant, I think mostly with a background in economic development. And he also is working on the project for both Medway Council in England and for Dundee College and Dundee City Council. And we've got Kostas, who is an economics lecturer from the University of Patras in Western Greece. But we've also got 2 guests that are been invited by other project partners. So we've got Karl-Philip, who works in the region of Skåne, I can't pronounce it, in the south of Sweden, and he's working on incubator strategy and development and working in entrepreneurship and things. And we've got Iván, who comes from Valnalón in the north of Spain, and his key focus, I think, is mainly sort of entrepreneurship education and supporting young people and raising awareness of entrepreneurship and the need for business growth. I think the aim of the session really is to focus on findings from our study visits that we've undertaken during the InCompass project, but also obviously to gain insight from colleagues who are working in incubation and entrepreneurship and working with entrepreneurs. We've got 30 minutes, I think, to discuss sort of 3 key areas that we've developed together. So we're going to look at what we've learned during the project about the creative sector incubators and sustainability, and obviously that will also come from people who are working in that sector who haven't necessarily been on all the study visits. We also want to look at in what terms should we be discussing sustainability? Is it about profit for the incubator? Is it about profit for the companies that are being supported? Or is it about social and economic benefit on a wider scale? And then finally, we've got one quick sort of area we might want to cover that looks at how do we evaluate success and what actually is success and what does sustainability mean? We're hoping we might have 10 minutes at the end for questions from the floor, so start thinking now if you've got any questions you'd like to ask our experts. So I think we'll just kick off, and the first question I'll probably just put to everybody on the panel, and you may all have an answer. If you don't panic. We want to know if you feel that we've identified through study visits or research, or obviously working in the creative sector and with entrepreneurs, have we actually identified any incubators or incubator programs that are clearly able to sustain themselves? Who wants to go first? Matt?
I'll start. I believe we saw a good example in the InCompass project in Cockpit Arts in London, which is a crafts incubator. And just a bit of background, while the creative industry is a very big deal in the UK, the craft sector is by far the smallest in terms of GVA. But what we saw is an incubator which is operated by a social enterprise, and it generates 93% of its own revenues, and the other 7% of its revenues comes from external private donations. So it has no recourse in public money whatsoever. Although it does rent one of its 2 premises off the local council, it actually has another premises in London which is mortgaged. So I think that is a very good example of an incubator which can stand on its own 2 feet.
Okay, I don't know if Iván has any thoughts. No, okay, Kostas?
Okay, I would say that during this long story of study visits in several places and incubators across Europe, we have faced some incubators that are really financially sustainable, but mainly we have faced with a huge heterogeneity of incubators in terms of sustainability, not only financial sustainability, but a multi-dimensional sustainability, and also that this heterogeneity is encompassed in the corresponding heterogeneity of the regional innovation systems that are surrounding this incubator. So I think that the most prominent question at this stage is every incubator across Europe potentially financially sustainable? And my answer at the first level is no. It depends on the regional innovation system where this incubator is encompassed.
That's fine. Thank you. Michele?
Yeah, I think I will work, I will build up on what Kostas just said, because I wonder whether we should bother with policies for incubators that are self-sustainable. Once they are self-sustainable, let's imitate them and let's become rich if they are becoming rich. So I think that we should, I mean, maybe it's a bit counter argument to the purpose of the project, but the project to me has been very enlightening to see ways of having an impact on the territory or being more efficient rather than becoming self-sustainable as a goal in itself, because again this would imply certain trade-offs, and maybe that will be later on, if we have the opportunity, I would like to dig on that.
Yep. Okay. Karl-Philip?
I would like to add to the question of sustainability that in terms of the incubator to be sustainable, we're in region Skåne and the Malmö Lund area. We're much looking at the companies within the incubator, the incubatees, and we're looking at where are they 3 years after the incubator program. And we can see from Inc. and the Diane innovation that almost 90% of the companies are still in business. And if we look at the other SMEs and companies in general in Sweden, we're down to around 50%. So that's what we point out as the important thing of a sustainable incubator, that they can create life-sustainable companies. So that's our point of the sustainable part for the incubators.
Okay, Iván?
Yeah, we're also looking at the 3-year survival rate. The figure we get is slightly worse than yours, but it's quite interesting. We get a 70% survival rate in 3 years, and we're doing that on a regular basis. That means that every year we try to keep track of what's going on, what's happening. On the other hand, on the debate on sustainability, I think if we approach this topic with a short-term vision, obviously we will be dealing with mainly like the financial aspects, but when you look at the social return on investment, I think that's a very nice indicator that we can start looking at. When you look at, for instance, the public money that's been invested, for each year it's been invested, what's the output of that money in terms of, you know, startups are created, they start paying taxes, so that gives back to the public. Probably we made a calculation which is for each euro we've invested, we're getting like 20 euro input back, right, in terms of taxes. So that will be a slightly different way of putting it.
Yep. Karl-Philip, sorry, what do you think it attributes to the success in Malmö? And would that be replicable in a different context, in a different city?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a large part is the innovation system around the incubators, the cluster, and also the other publicly funded actors or the companies working with the innovation system. So if they work together, we talk a lot now about act together, not act alone. So that's, I think, is the key area to work on, to have the innovation system and the incubators to like stand out and be nodes and meeting points for innovation and sustainable ideas.
Does anybody else want to come back on any of those comments? Or
Yeah, I think this point is we learned this also in our regional implementation group, how important it is to work together.
And also, I think it's very important to have a mix between established and startups, because that's where the creativity happens. We often say that you can, if you want to find creative perspectives, paint yourself into a corner, and then you can start to create or creativate, as we say. Because if you're creative, you have to be active. So and then we have creativity.
If we develop further our discussion on the fact that actually there is a difference between the social rate of return from innovation, from incubation, and the corresponding private rate of return, we introduce in our discussion the role of subsidy immediately, directly. But I know that in the last years, at least that the word of subsidies is not a good noisy word, so I would not like to continue on this topic.
Okay. I mean, we've sort of touched on some of the other areas we were going to look at, and I'll maybe raise the question anyway. I mean, Karl-Philip has mentioned it, but did we see common traits across incubators that were more successful than others? For example, were they focusing on a mixture of established businesses and startups? Were they focusing more on technology-led creative businesses, or more creative businesses in their own right, or had they all developed practices? Do you think there was any commonality?
I think from Vladimir's presentation, we obviously identified a number of common factors across under the tiers of support element of InCompass. And I think I mentioned copy arts before, but I mean, in London you get a far less systematic support network in terms of creative innovation, but essentially a lot of the services are provided under a different mechanism, and generally under a social entrepreneurial mechanism. So I don't think there's a clear, they're not clearly distinguished, just a method of actually delivering it.
Yeah, I guess maybe another couple of points is that incubation or incubators are ventures, and in a way, those that manage incubators must be entrepreneurial in some forms. And then maybe it's very important the context. Karl-Philip works in Sweden, in a quite developed part of Sweden. You can't really expect to have incubators with the same rate of success or the same business model everywhere in Europe, because the situations are very diverse.
Okay. I mean, that's really answered one of the next question we were thinking about looking at was, can we replicate these across different regions? And as you say, we really need to be focusing on taking the best practices and mixing them up for your own region rather than trying to make one model fit every region. One of the other things we want to discuss was, we've seen lots of them. We've been to 29 different incubators in 7 different regions. Obviously, you're working in your own working lives with different incubators that we've not visited and things like that. But have we actually identified things that are missing from a model of success? We've identified what we see as best practice from what they are delivering, but has anybody identified things they think should be included that we've not necessarily seen in the area? Matt?
I don't think it's absolutely missing. So I think there was a clear element of the, again, I'm talking about the copy arts example. Again, referring back to Vladimir's presentation, what was missing from that list, which was evident at Cockpit Arts, was clear evidence of business development assistance that's provided by the incubator to incubatees, and essentially it's lead generation, and that is develops in a very successful way by Cockpit Arts because they have strong relationships with buyers, and I don't think we really saw that
anywhere else
in other incubators, but I think it's actually a critical issue.
I think one of the things we've seen in Dundee is that the visibility for these small companies is a real issue in helping them to establish and grow. So what Matt was saying about Cockpit Arts is that they've got this visibility, they've got the opportunity for their businesses to be visible to the public through open days, through selling networks and through local shops, but we didn't necessarily see that. We don't necessarily see that in Dundee for these small businesses very often, and I think probably in other areas as well. Sorry, Kostas.
No, it's okay. I'm not sure that we can discuss about missing element of success in incubation process, but I would say that we have observed that different incubators follow different growth patterns, not necessarily that lead to a success, maybe to a failure, but it's very, very difficult to find elements that are immediately transferable from the best practices, from the success stories to the rest of the incubators.
I think there's a key challenge about the profile of users. When you're talking about creativity, you get like, sometimes in our experience, you get the creative type, get in coming into first contact with our incubation services. And I think most of the time it just scares them away, it puts them off. So we sort of, I think from a service provider perspective, I think we really need to reframe the language we use, reframe the support measures we put in place to cater for the needs of this particular group, because there's quite a lot of stuff going on out there that does not really fit the conventional wisdom of entrepreneurship. A couple of interesting pieces of research in the UK show that on the one hand, the self-employment drive is very different. In fact, they identify 6 different types of self-employed people, and not all of them are growth-oriented. So that's one key aspect, and that's my, I tend to contend with Astrid's view in that sense, and this piece of research was undertaken in this year, 2014. And then you got another very interesting one, which is Disrupt Inc., which is about the young people challenging the views of conventional entrepreneurship. I think we really need to tap into that sort of potential and see if we're really providing the service this kind of people need.
Yeah, an organisation that I heard speaking in Scotland that shall remain nameless was heard to say, about creative entrepreneurs and creative businesses, that they needed to learn to speak our language instead of the organisation speaking the language of the creative entrepreneurs. And I think that is a problem that we have from particularly public sector organisations trying to provide support. It's different, I think, from entrepreneurs trying to provide support.
Can I just, I totally agree with Iván's point. I thought that was incredibly important. I think just to put a finer point on the first thing about reframing language, we saw in the Centre for Creative Collaboration projects a real focus on the word collaboration. And this is actually very much in the mindset of, this is very much in the mindset of young, very evident in the mindset of young entrepreneurs these days. They're much more open with about sharing ideas and working together. I think that's a very much a trait of modern business practices now.
Okay. One of the things we've discussed obviously is about sustainability, and we always talk about that being an incubator that is profitable, so that it doesn't require public sector intervention. And in this sort of short discussion, I think it would be useful for us to think about what we consider profitability to be. Is it profitability for the incubator itself? Is it profitability for the businesses that are supported and are growing? Whether that is one person who wants to have their own business and they just want to employ themselves, and or they are growth-oriented businesses, and also should it be also focusing on the benefits, as Kostas has pointed out, to the social economy or to the economy in general? Does anybody have any ideas or views on what we should be considering in terms of profitability? They're all too polite.
The key
Karl.
question. I would say that if we look at in a broader perspective, it will be an evaluation model covering all the things that you mentioned now, and that will be the challenge to find that, because all the incubators are measuring their own evaluation indicators, and we need to find some way where we can gather around a type of measuring system for incubators in Europe in general, but I think for the creative incubators we can use profit in terms of new materials, and we can use now we're talking a lot about in Lund the ESS and Max 4 Lab, two of the largest research developments investments in a long time in Europe, and the profit or the gain for society or for Europe is we will really find new materials and also find new research through that, and that's for us a large profit in the society in general.
Yeah. Matt?
I mean, just a quick one. I generally say that I personally believe that there is a strong social justification for the incubation in general. But just to clarify that, I think I'd illustrate the point by saying that if you go to the Google campus, in London is populated exclusively by young middle class kids. And I think that they're the ones who actually can afford to do startup, because the bank of mum and dad can basically bankroll them for a period of time. And I think that there's a very, very important point there, in that are we basically saying that startup is just for a certain section of society.
I think maybe Iván will see that slightly differently in terms of your education programme, that you're working with a really broad spectrum of young people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, we've been also involved in a European Social Fund project called Communities of Practice for Inclusive Entrepreneurship, and that was basically the point. I mean, middle class people, well, families, they're okay. They don't have any problem, but if you really need to reach for those people who wouldn't have access to that sort of experience, if you wish. On the public sector intervention, I know this is not like probably politically correct to say in the current political climate, but I think I don't have any problems with public sector intervention, and in fact I think that's one of the myths. We need to be some sort of mythbusters, in the sense like when you look at, for instance, R&D, or research and development, public sector is vital, and nothing would have ever happened without it, public sector intervention, even in the US. So let's just probably, cut the crap and start to, acknowledge the role it should play, but let's not say, we shouldn't let the public sector do things. No, the public sector has to invest in this.
I mean, that sort of goes to one of the questions that we've listed was, are incubators actually just a link in an innovation chain? And therefore, if we're supporting or subsidising other areas in the innovation chain, such as innovation vouchers or, providing R&D support, why shouldn't we be supporting incubators in the same way using public sector funding? And obviously Iván has an opinion. I don't know if anybody else agrees that, public sector support for this type of activity is really key. Michele?
Don't you think that a key role of public sector should be to create the conditions why people want to stay in an incubator? And as Matt was saying, if this is just about a group of people, a social group that anyway would have started their own enterprise, maybe it's useless to intervene for the public sector. But if we can be more inclusive, that is a great achievement, and maybe incubators can be a profitable way to do so, or let's say a more efficient way to do so.
So do you think therefore we should be targeting, we've obviously in the earlier discussions talked about some of this targeting specific client groups with our public sector support? Do you think that's appropriate?
In economics they have this concept of market failure, and this justifies the public intervention. Then, of course, it must be seen how you intervene, because there are also ways that are not so efficient and not so clear sometimes, but still, if there is, the argument is still valid from a theoretical point of view, even in times of recession or tight budgets, this remain
perhaps even more so in times of recession, that it's important. Costas?
I think this issue is crucial to this discussion, and also is closely associated to the issue discussed before about the evaluation of the incubator's operation. I would say that the techniques in order to evaluate the effectiveness or the efficiency of the incubators are available. The crucial point is to inject the notion of evaluation of everyday operation or the long-term operation of the incubation system in our everyday management and strategic planning, both in EU countries and in Europe as the whole. This is not a point of the available techniques of evaluation. I think that there are a lot of them. Some of them are very strict and very complicated. Some others are too loose, but we can find the best solution in this issue. But we have to associate closely, very, very closely, the public subsidy, the public intervention with the evaluation of the incubators.
Yeah.
Iván?
About the innovation chain, I think we really need to, I don't know how to put it, probably look back or look down. Okay, incubation are obviously a link in that chain, but you have to look back at, for instance, what's going on in schools. Got a couple of examples from, one is in the Basque Country, for instance, vet schools are becoming entrepreneurial hubs, right, where you have an incubation unit right inside that vet school. That sort of makes things easier for vet school students or former students to start out their own companies. And on the other hand, and from a more regional perspective, that's the work we're doing in the place where I live, in Asturias, which is a small region in the north of Spain. We're also trying to link both worlds. So we call the enterprise education programs, primary, secondary vet. Then we got startup support, but we're also trying to create opportunities for those two worlds to meet in terms of like mentoring schemes, in terms of challenges in, so I think that really shows you like some sort of like progression model on the one hand for like any small kid, at least having an experience and an opportunity to interact with this sort of thing. And then on the other hand, they got access to role models, and this is not only about iconic role models, right? This is about next door role models. We're taking, for instance, entrepreneurs to schools who are just about to close a company.
Yeah.
So things have gone awry, and now I'm just thinking about, and that's perfectly fine.
That's showing that it's okay to
This is
fail.
showing,
Yeah.
the whole diversity of the entrepreneurial way of life.
And
I think that's something that needs to be further improved.
Yeah. Matt?
I mean, just to support that point, I think the point needs to be made that enterprise is a peer exercise. People respond when they see it. They can actually physically experience enterprise. So I think it's very much about taking those sort of approaches and to change the culture that Astrid was referring to. I think.
I think we're seeing that. I mean, obviously Dundee and Angus College are very much looking at an entrepreneurship programme and trying to encourage them. The colleagues from Medway, from the college in Medway, are obviously delivering a very similar activity in terms of engaging at every stage in the education process and raising awareness. And I think what we're seeing is that you see in Sweden, for example, when you go to Mink and they say they've got 300 applicants every year for 30 spaces, we wouldn't see that in Dundee, for example. So what's the difference between how they're being educated or how people are experiencing entrepreneurship in the south of Sweden compared to our own regions and things like that? And I think we need to maybe learn from the models of making entrepreneurship something young people think about from a very young age, rather than what we are seeing in Dundee a lot of the time is people are becoming entrepreneurs because they can't get a job anywhere else. So they decide to set up a business, but they're all setting up small scale, businesses that are competing with each other rather than, being entrepreneurial and creative and innovative. Sorry, Karl.
I totally agree, but we still have the challenge to connect the incubators with the science parks and the universities and the other players in the innovation chain. So, but of course it's great to have 300 applying for 30 spaces. But to fill in the previous speakers around the creativity and the creative ideas. The usual business models or the language we use within the incubators are probably scaring away a lot of entrepreneurs within the cultural and creative sectors.
Yeah, we're not sure how to talk to them or how to engage with them.
Can I just make a quick point also? I think we need to be careful about the structures that we employ, as from a public sector perspective. I was particularly interested actually in the emphasis on a report which looks at the creative plot incubator in India, which basically suggested that actually the Swedish structures ought to be a little bit more entrepreneurial and less managerial.
Okay, we've got one final question, and then we'll open up the floor. We're just wondering, is it possible for traditional incubators that are supporting, entrepreneurs of any sort, particularly maybe technology innovation, to actually adjust their models so that they can actually support creative businesses more effectively? Can they learn the language that needs to be learned to support that sector?
Diane, can you be more specific, please? When you say traditional incubators, is what? Is the building? Is the manager? Is the program? Because
I think it's a mixture of everything. I mean, I think you could take from it what you would. Some of it's about the building and the space, but I think it's more about the program. It's more about the sector that you're trying to support.
I think you mean incubators that are targeting the science-based firms.
Yeah, the technology-based firms rather than creative. Yeah.
May I give an answer about this? The theory of the management and of the innovation at this point says that the established routines of the traditional innovators and incubators, and the organizational memory of these incubators is a very, very serious barrier to change their orientation towards to creative entrepreneurs. But it's a barrier, and every barrier can be overcome.
Karl, Matt? Karl?
My answer to that is yes, you can, because we have a great example from the creative plot in Lund and the idea and innovation that has been up and running for almost 20 years, the idea and innovation. And then in 2012 they added the creative plot within the same company identity number, and that's for me it's a groundbreaking way to work with incubation. And
when they did that, did they have to take on new staff to help them do it?
Of
yeah,
course,
so they weren't using the existing.
Of course, you have to, but you can use also the structure you already have and the network and the building and the area within the incubator. And also you can meet companies, the creative people meet other companies and vice versa. Which is very important, I think. Sorry, Matt and then Iván.
Well, I mean, yes is the obvious answer, but I would go further and say that it's actually a necessity.
Yeah.
Cross-innovation is really the holy grail of incubation now. But within that, when you look at it, it's fundamentally the transfer of tacit knowledge. And how do you do that if you're getting different people from different sectors closely interacting?
Yep.
Just one final point. I think there's a fairly obvious example of this. I mean, probably the most famous tech company in the world is Apple. Who's the front of Apple? Well, it's Steve Jobs, and he wasn't the tech man.
No.
So it's bringing together.
They took the design aspect of it rather than the technology aspect, and
absolutely bring together different skill sets.
Yeah. Iván?
Yeah, I think when we're talking about creativities, there's always this bias, which is the social desirability. If we ask the audience here, well, are you all out for creativity? We'll go and crazy about it. Say, of course, yeah, we love creativity. But my concern is that if we, as say, if we're in an incubator, we are kind of like the gatekeepers, right? We hold the key in certain sense. Are we really prepared to identify, to spot, to support and embrace really creative ideas? Because some of them might sound perfectly nuts, from a very I
think we saw one in Ideon, but never mind.
And when you look at, for instance, this has been done in medical research, you tend to see that when experts evaluating projects, they tend to reject the most creative projects.
Yeah.
And when you ask teachers to define the creative student, they tend to misunderstand the creative student with the well-disciplined student.
Yeah.
So there's some imbalances there that we really need to address.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
So,
I was just going to come in if I can. I think it's an incredibly important point, and it links to the point I was saying about collaboration. I think the world's changing in that respect. But there's a great quote from Howard Aitken, who was from IBM phone, who basically said, when you have a great idea, you'll have to shove it down people's throats. Because they won't understand it.
Yeah. Michele?
I completely agree with what Marta said earlier about cross innovation. We have, and also about changing barriers. We have the examples of Politecnico di Milano. I had an accelerator. When we had to organize our study visit, we excluded them from our visit because they were too techy. And 2 years later, this accelerator has been closed down, and they open a new space, bigger, in which they include also the design and other creative people. But at this point, the question emerges whether there is a scope or how wide is the scope for a pure cultural or creative incubator, whether it will be even better
possible
to put them together with other sectors, no?
Yeah. I don't know if anybody on the floor has any questions. Does anybody? I'm sure our panel could talk forever. So, yeah, Gillian? Sorry, Michele.
Dundee. You make it sound really easy, actually, when it's signed up. I just wondered, in the complicated world of innovation and creativity, how on earth do you get that kind of local buy-in for things that tend to happen on the fringes, as Matt eloquently described? You know, you have to literally shove it down people's throats. So how do you go about that? Because I think we're seeing a lot of innovative practices emerging, but it's not very well understood by local municipalities, etc. And also, I just wanted to mention that there is a European mapping exercise happening, Creative Hubs mapping survey, which is being run by ASICT in Portugal, and it's in advance of a big Creative Hub conference early next year. So working with, but yeah, so innovative opportunities for incubation and support of creative industries in the future. How do you get buy-in?
So is that the buy-in of the users or the buy-in of the municipality?
Municipality, because a lot of the focus at the moment is on evidence-based work. That's where a lot of funding's going to. But how does that work in practice when it's kind of on the fringes, when there's no evidence yet to see it?
Anybody? She stumped them all. Matt?
Yeah, Matt.
I don't think that's an easy question at all. My approach is you just have to keep hammering away at it. You have to basically raise the profile. You have to point out, certainly in the UK, like I know in the UK case, that creative industries are growing faster than any other sector in terms of GDA, employment and exports. So it's no longer fluffy. But I think slowly the penny's beginning to drop. But I think we're not there yet.
I was impressed. A couple of weeks ago, I was in, it's called Creative Morning. It's Frog Design, I think it's a quite famous agency, and they were hosting a talk with a young entrepreneur, Italian entrepreneur, 25 years old, very creative, he has already patents, very interesting guy. And the thing that to me was most interesting was the fact that this guy, even so young, has been able to already sell his services to public institutions like theaters or cultural institutions. So I didn't expect that public administration in Italy would be so, to say, forward-looking to support this kind of entrepreneur. But I was very happily surprised by the fact that public institutions in the cultural environment, that they understand better the innovative potential of certain people, were able to give, to trust these people and give them some job to do. So maybe there is a way that is not policymakers, it's not policymakers understanding everything. It's other parts of the public.
The service providers and things, yeah. We've got
So
time for what? Sorry.
Can I just say, there is something else that I would advocate actually, which is actually not directly going to politicians, it's more engaging with other business sectors, and you raise the profile through other business sectors, and also celebrate your successes.
Got time for one more question, if anybody? Or are we all so hungry that lunch is calling? No? Okay, one more.
I was interested to find out with the ones that you've worked across, with the growth of the creative industries, your planning on the arts of creativity, what happened to those practices that didn't necessarily fit into the product at the end, and how, perhaps across the models, what approaches were used to support those artists or individuals or groups that didn't necessarily have
So how you support an artist rather than a company creating a product or a service, so an individual who's looking just to employ themselves in reality. Yeah. Okay. Anybody on the floor or anybody on the panel an answer to?
I mean, I don't have empirical evidence of this, but because I don't run an incubator, and I don't think we look closely enough at the incubator model, so we sort of answer that question properly. But I'll make 2 points. First of all, I think that it's incumbent on incubation processes to be, while being selective, to not be discriminatory. I can't stand the whole notion of picking winners, but I think it's just a nonsense. But I think that it's incumbent on the innovation processes to be responsive. So the onus is on the creative to keep trying, but that we should respond effectively.
One final comment from anybody, or we're done? Okay, can I just say thank you to the panel, and they will be around for the rest of the day, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them. Thank you.